Hi. Yeah?
Dear Elijah, your story starts long before the day you arrived, early and unexpected, into this world. It dates back to 2016. That's when I bought your sister the raglan shirt proclaiming her a big sister despite me not yet being pregnant. Having a second child would be easy, we thought. We didn't know. We couldn't then. The pregnancy test came in positive just 6 months later, but things didn't feel right. The usual signs of a percolating baby were missing. There was no nausea, no loss of appetite. The fatigue didn't set in. By the 6th week, I wondered if something was wrong. That was the first miscarriage. A 4-day weekend in February softened the emotional blow, but not the physical pain. I didn't get out of bed for 2 days. The second time we received a positive test result, I felt uneasiness in my bones. Nerves, I thought. Perhaps my rabid anxiety. Lightning doesn't strike the same place twice. But it did. By the time I arrived at the doctor's office, it was clear I had been pregnant, but wasn't anymore. We kept trying, only to be confronted with negatives. Pregnancy tests became a line item in our budget. Someone mentioned the term secondary infertility. We opted for the more expensive insurance to cover possible treatments. I beat myself up physically, running harder and faster. I earned course records and personal bests because I was trying to outrun the pain. The harder I pounded the pavement, the further I was from the reaching hand of depression. Sometimes it only felt a fingernail away. I'd oversell myself as hopeful the third time we saw a positive. That whole third time's a charm cliche. Fear gripped me though. We didn't make plans. I told Daddy not to take the afternoon off for the first doctor's appointment. We had trouble finding you at first. The extra pounds of weighted sorrow had settled into my abdomen. I heard you before I dared to look. The rhythmic beat had twice eluded me before. Then I saw your flicker. We called you Jelly Bean. I was put on hormones to make sure you stuck. Diabetes medication started soon after, children's aspirin nightly, precautions, cloaks of assurance, yet still, it didn't feel real. In December 2017, we discovered you were a boy. We knew you'd be Elijah for the prophet of miracles and fire. But I didn't connect to you until a 3D ultrasound in March. The first time you wouldn't show us your face. We left with nothing but my despair. On a weekend night, we fought rush hour traffic to go back, barely making our time slot. We saw you then. You had my nose. For the first time in my pregnancy, I felt as if you may actually arrive. We just didn't expect you when you did. After a bad brush with preeclampsia with your sister and what was called a traumatic birth experience, I opted to schedule a C-section. June 13th was the first option. That's your uncle's birthday. We decided on June 14th. May 20th, my 34th birthday, I started to feel sick. I was tired. A surprise birthday party perked me up. By the next day, a Sunday, I was preparing to give my last in-person final for the semester, sending out last-minute email reminders to my students. Don't be late, I said. I never made it to my classroom. At 4 a.m. May 21st, I woke up seeing bright spots with a disorienting headache. It's vague now, but I remember stumbling to the bathroom and calling for your daddy. An in-home blood pressure check sent us into action. Too high. We drove quietly to Manteca with your sister in tow. To her, it was an impromptu sleepover with Grandma and Nono. The next day was a whirlwind of pokes and prods and hope for a quick release to wait out the last few weeks at home. The blood pressure, though, never stabilized. In the evening, we were told you were coming as soon as an operating room could be made available. There was a hiccup. Someone had brought me food. I ate the turkey sandwich before anyone could stop me. No C-section until at least 3:30 a.m., which gave your daddy 2 extra hours of sleep. You arrived in this world at 4:12 a.m., May 22nd. With a slight cry, I waited 35 weeks and 6 days to hear. You grunted. In the recovery room, the nurses noted your labored breathing. The blur that resembles memories doesn't give me a sense of time in those moments. All I know is you went to the NICU, I went to the maternity ward, and you never joined me. Acute respiratory failure, pneumothorax. You were covered in wires plugged into your 8-pound, 1-ounce body to help your undeveloped lungs. Not small, but not healthy. The feeding tube came next. In my room, away from you, I desperately tried to pump, to do anything, something to help you. I stared off into the wall. I cried. Your daddy reminded me that we didn't live in that moment. But those days dragged on until I pulled myself out of that magnesium-induced fog, convincing me that you'd never come home. I checked out before you did to return to your sister who needed her mommy and some stability back. For 4 days, we made multiple trips from Tracy to Modesto, carrying breast milk and hope. A week after you were born was the first time I got to hold you since that day. We took a photo, our first as a family of 4. It hangs along our staircase, despite my exhaustion and your sister's disheveled hair. Our world stood still during the 8 days you were in the NICU, which is a fraction of the time your nearest preemie neighbors would be there. The time since then has eclipsed those days. Your smiles, your laughs, your coos have long since replaced what was our pain. A nurse in the NICU told me before you left that you just wanted to be held. Which brings me to why I write this letter. You will find, Elijah, you don't have Photoshop designed month-by-month placards celebrating every milestone. The blanket I purchased on Etsy for you to take pictures was only used a couple times. There was never a formal birth announcement sent to family and friends. I listened to that nurse. I held you every chance I could. When you screamed at me so much those first few months that we thought something had to be wrong with you. When you were admitted to the hospital for a respiratory virus in February, and I was there with you most nights despite having to wake up early to teach. When people told me to put you down and to let you cry it out. When I could have done 100 other things to preserve the memories and the moments, I held you instead. I remember every day that your story started long before you were born. The pain of miscarriage and the sadness of empty arms on 2 never realized due dates. I know I am one of the lucky ones who gets a rainbow after the storm. So Elijah, I will continue to hold you before anything else.